and welcome to the Magic Flute. My name is Dr. Kayleen Asbo, and it's my privilege to share with you a little bit of the backstory of this opera. And hopefully it will be something that will tease you and tantalize you, and if you'd like to learn more, we have references for you to pursue after the opera is over. We are about to see an opera that has enchanted children and perplexed philosophers and continually delighted and befuddled audiences around the world since its opening 126 years ago. It is an opera of extraordinary contradictions, and this is the theme that I would like to explore with you. It was actually called, quote, the most absurd example of a genre in which nonsense often rules. Was that for a definition of opera librettos? And yet, simultaneously, it is also the perfect opera to introduce children to, incredibly accessible, and at the same time, there is this hidden treasure trove of symbolism, esoteric and archetypal and psychoanalytic significance in this opera that has consumed scholars. You can actually find whole volumes of books that are dedicated simply to exploring the numerology in this opera. Simply the numerology, for example, the number 3. It's written in a key signature with 3 flats. We're going to see 3 ladies who serve the queen of the night and 3 innocent young boys. So you can really get lost in all of the deep symbolism that's behind the seeming fairy tale. There are many books that have been written on the hidden Masonic significance of this opera, and I would like to play just the opening motif of one of these 3 symbols, which is these 3 opening chords that was said to be the knock of the initiates into the door, and maybe the masons in the audience can let me know if this is true. But we're going to hear this motif. Example number 1, please. The secret knock for entrance into the rituals of the lodge. By the way, the references within the opera that you're about to see to the secret Masonic initiations are so numerous that after Mozart's death, there was a rumor that circulated that the Masons actually had him murdered because he showed too much information on the stage. This is just one of the many stories that circulate in the background of this. So to explore some of the seeming contradictions, I'd like to begin with an aria where we are first introduced to the character of Papageno. He's a very earthy bird catcher. And we hear here the musical motif that will come to define so much of the opera. It becomes this thread that weaves through a call and response, whereby characters find their way throughout the course of this opera. And the motif that I want you to listen for in the flute is this very, very simple idea, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just this ascending scale. Please, example 2.
Was höre ich? Wo bin ich? Welch unbekannter Ort? Ha! Eine männliche Figur nähert sich dem Tal.
I'm going to invite you, if you were going to use a few words to describe the music that you just heard, what would you say? What are some of the characteristics? Raise your hand if you would agree with the word lighthearted. Playful? Catchy? I saw some of you nodding your heads like, oh, here it is, this cute tune. Toe tapping? Very delightful. Very, very delightful. And yet, even though this aria is the essence of simplicity and joy, I think it's fascinating to know that the circumstances of the writing of this music was anything but joyful. In 1791, as Mozart began to work on this opera, he was desperately fending off creditors. You can read the letters where he is begging for money from his Masonic brothers, and it will break your heart. He was not able to really pay for the rent. He was fearful that his wife was having an affair while she was at a health spa. He had every reason to feel acute despair. In the years between 1786 and 1791, he had seen a precipitous decline in his income. He had resorted to actually pawning his belongings in order to help make ends meet. And in the 4 years before the magic flute was created, the Mozart family had experienced the death of 3 of their infant children. That gives an added poignancy when we see this symbol of these 3 innocent youths across the stage. And both Wolfgang and his wife Constanze had suffered from repeated serious illnesses and potentially deadly infections themselves. So it was during these last difficult years of life that Wolfgang Amadeus deepened a friendship with a carousing, womanizing actor named Emanuel Schikaneder. He was an actor actually famous for his portrayal of Hamlet. Those of you who have seen Hamlet in its uncut production, you know what a mammoth work it is. Well, he was so popular in his portrayal of Hamlet that the audiences insisted that he come back to the stage and repeat scenes. So hard to imagine, right? So Schikaneder had been identified with Hamlet, and like many actors who are sort of pigeonholed, he wanted to show a very different side of his potential. He actually wanted to become the clown. So he wrote the libretto of the Magic Flute, and he wrote the role of Papageno for himself to play. Interesting to imagine from Hamlet to Papageno. And this became this great collaboration between these 2 friends. And the Magic Flute was a German Singspiel, which is the equivalent of off Broadway. If you read your liner notes, you'll find out that there was the smell of roasted meats and garlic everywhere, and that people showed up to carouse and drink beer before the production. So one of the ironies, one of the great juxtapositions, is that this is really in many ways a farce. And yet it is also a sublime spiritual tractate that was premiered in an off Broadway, but now we get to see is the most popular opera in the world in these glorious opera houses. Now, originally Mozart and Schikaneder intended this to be in their language, in the German language, and we are going to get to see it in our language tonight, in English. The translation of the libretto that we're going to have is by David Gottlieb. And while it is in some ways on the surface unconventional, at its heart it is also actually quite faithful to the spirit of the original. In the spirit of the original, there were these very colorful ad-libs and remarks to there would be references to contemporary events. We're going to see that tonight as well. And so while Schikaneder didn't use the word boy toy, and David Gottlieb does, it is in the spirit of making it culturally relevant to our time. So we're going to feel this juxtaposition of this earthy language, this contemporary cultural reference. There will be a penchant for slapstick, very much an original part of the production, and enormous physical humor. Enormous physical humor. And yet, for all of its silliness and tomfoolery, the heart of this opera is a solemn and noble quest for wisdom under the auspices of Isis and Osiris. Isis and Osiris were ancient Egyptian gods that were the mythical founders of the art of alchemy. And alchemy is a science that involved the pursuit of transformation of both material and spiritual substances. And it did so by the tension of the opposites. Some of the symbols of alchemy are the sun and the moon and fire and water, and we're going to encounter those as key symbols of the opera. Alchemy has a fascinating history with a list of practitioners that stretches from antiquity through Albertus Magnus, Thomas Aquinas, and my favorite, Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton wrote more books on alchemy than he wrote on physics or on calculus. And you can get lost in the subject, and if you would like to get a little bit more lost in the subject, there's a reference to a paper I've written for graduate school on my website. The most notable alchemist of the 18th century in Austria, however, was a man that Mozart knew very well. His name was Ignaz von Born, and he was a master of the Rosicrucian Masonic lodges in Vienna. He was a chemist. He was the author of a book on the mystery initiations in Egypt, and most importantly for us tonight, he was the model for the character of Zoroaster. Alchemy, as Born practiced it, involved the search for the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone was a process of distillation of essences and an intensification of the tension of the opposites. Physically, it was thought that if you found the philosopher's stone, it would turn lead into gold. And Ignaz von Born had been actually rewarded by the previous emperor for his studies on doing just this. But Born also followed the path of inner alchemy, and inner alchemy was a path to find inner healing, wholeness, and spiritual fulfillment. And the fact that Mozart and Schikaneder knew about the alchemical principles is very clear, not just from what you're going to see tonight, if you look at it through a certain lens, but also that they had previously collaborated on another little musical drama that was called The Philosopher's Stone. So to really appreciate the magic flute, we have to understand that it is a work that references alchemy, and that in his music, Mozart is purposefully intensifying opposites in his quest to mirror the esoteric pursuit of divine wisdom. We are going to see the marriage of the silly and the sublime, and that is intentional. We are going to encounter extremes of high and low, masculine and feminine, slapstick and suicide. The music will reflect the widest possible diversity and opposition, from catchy, simple folk songs like we just heard, to dense, somber, minor-keyed fugues with ethereal hymns to Egyptian gods, grieving laments, and curtain-ripping showstoppers to boot. Mozart and Schikaneder also give us pairs of characters that form opposites. There are the three lusting ladies that are really hot for the hero, and there are three very innocent young boys who accompany the hero, the spiritually aspirant Tamino, and then the bird-catching clown and glutton Papageno. There will be the beautiful heroine Pamina, who is courageous, loyal, melancholic, and the unlovable and malevolent buffoon Monostatos. Above all, we're going to experience the tension of the opposites embodied by the Queen of the Night and Zoroaster, the Lord of Light and the High Priest of the Sun. Now, we might be tempted to think of this as a fairy tale. After all, a young prince will be on our stage fighting a dragon. He's chosen by a magical queen to rescue her beautiful daughter. Accompanied by a playful sidekick, the hero goes through a series of trials in his attempts to rescue the beloved, beautiful, and abducted maiden. And then, eventually, the lovers are welcomed back with a celebration of their divine union. Sounds like a standard fairy tale plot, doesn't it? But there's a couple of catches. To start with, the hero actually faints in his battle with the serpent, and it is in fact these three lusty ladies who rescue him. And Prince Tamino does in fact fall in love with the queen's daughter through a portrait, and he will sing this beautiful aria of lovelorn anticipation. Example 3, please. This image I see before me of such divine loveliness. Thank you. It is a gorgeous aria, and it is certainly worthy of a noble hero. But I'm going to spoil it right now and tell you it's going to be another hour before the hero actually encounters the princess face to face. And instead, it's actually Tamino's sidekick, the bird catcher, who is disheveled and, quote, hygiene challenged, who actually comes to Princess Pamina's rescue instead. And in one of the most curious parts of the opera, The love duet about the joy of marriage is sung by Pamino and Papageno, the heroine and the bird catcher. Example 4, please. It's as if Cinderella was singing about, oh, so this is love, but instead of with the prince, she sings it to the mice instead. What is going on? Our expectations are further subverted then when, rather than rescuing Pamina from the underworld of Zarastro, Tamino decides to join the Brotherhood instead, and he is led by the priests into the temple of Isis and Osiris with this solemn hymn to bless his quest. Example 5. But in Act 2, our sympathies are flip-flopped. Now the kidnapper appears as a beneficent spiritual father, filled with wisdom, compassion, and mercy, while the devoted mother that we saw in the beginning now seems a lot more like, well, Lady Macbeth. Insane with lust for power and blood. In the most dramatic aria of the opera that you're going to see today, the Queen of the Night demands that her daughter commit murder or she will disown her. Now, this aria begins with a clap of thunder in a stormy key of D minor, but as it ascends to the stratosphere, these high Fs, it takes on this childlike sing-song quality that it is almost manic in an extended passage in the very sunny key of F major. And by the way, folks, this is an aria that very few singers in the world can sing. It is so difficult that every time a singer takes the stage, I cross my fingers because it is so difficult. Example 6, please. I don't know what that says about his in-law relationships, but interesting, and it was a role that actually made Giuseppe Weber's career. We are going to veer from one extreme to another in Act 2. After this bloodthirsty battle cry for vengeance with those intense high Fs, we next have Zarastro singing this beautiful and solemn hymn to wisdom. And as high as the queen went to the stratosphere, that's how low Zarastro will go in this song. Example 7. initiations include tests of silence. Apparently this was also a reference to Masonic rituals, which leave our heroine Pamina feeling abandoned and unloved. And it is here in her sorrowful aria that she contemplates suicide, and Mozart pours some of his most exquisite, heartfelt, and plaintive melodic writing, music which would not have been out of place if this had been Ophelia, actually, in Hamlet. Example 8. He also contemplates suicide, and these three young boys come to stay his hand, and what results is the moment of greatest comedy that you're going to see this afternoon. This is the delightful duet Papageno as he and his love match imagine a future populated with a brood of children. Next example, please. By the end of this, then we worry about you. We worry about you. From the heights to the depths, from the deepest sorrow to this joyful, joyful celebration of life. Now, modern sensibilities are often disturbed by the seeming misogyny in the magic flute, but even here, not as all it appears on the surface. And I'd like to invite you to remember as we watch this that despite the priest's declaration that women cannot be trusted and are filled with deception, it is in fact our character Papageno who first appears on stage as a liar. And it is the three women who rescue the fainting prince, and it is Princess Pamina who gives Tamino the courage to face and endure the road of trials as she accompanies him through fire and water, becoming worthy of initiation. And we must remember that the three little boys are actually servants of the Queen of the Night, and it is she who actually gives to Tamino and Papageno the musical instruments that will be their salvation. So what are we to make of all these contradictions? One way to read these reversals that we have in character is, as Jungians have, to imagine that all of the characters we are about to see are aspects of the psyche, with the Queen and Zarasto representing both the positive and the negative aspects of the masculine and the feminine, the mother and the father principle in its light and dark aspects. And in this reading, the double pair of lovers will mirror the unconscious and conscious, with each character representing a different aspects of being. At the end of the opera, all are brought to the temple of Isis and Osiris, which in the alchemical tradition was the mythical, mystical place where we could achieve the union of the opposites and find our way to healing, wholeness, and joy. Imagine, if you will then, that all of these characters are a part of you. They certainly were a part of Mozart, a man in whom live side by side the contradictions of the innocent child, the flirtatious sensualist who delighted in wine, women, and song, the idealistic mason, a man sometimes consumed with paranoia, depression, and even spite, an ardent lover, an eager and devoted father, and the incomparable master of musical beauty, a man whose own quest was to hope that he would be led step by step into wisdom. From the heights to the depths, from pathos to slapstick comedy, let the music carry you today. Tonight's production emphasizes the element of childlike playfulness with a set and costumes that carry the combined wisdom of Dr. Seuss and Tim Burton. It really is something to behold. Imagine, if you will, that Pablo Picasso had a party with Alice in Wonderland and Willy Wonka. And marvel, I want you to marvel as you listen to the infectious, light-hearted tunes of Papageno, that such music was possible from the pen of a man in the depths of despair, on the edge of financial catastrophe, and grieving the death of 3 children. In alchemy, the philosopher's stone was hard won after enduring tensions of opposites, and it was believed to create both literal and spiritual gold. And its third property was that it would bring immortality. Mozart the man lived for only 2 months after the premiere of this opera. But the popularity of the magic flute has ensured that Mozart the composer did indeed find the magic alchemical formula in music that will make him live in our hearts and minds forever. If you would like to learn more about the symbolism behind Mozart and depth psychology, there are cards here that will be links to an online course that will be offered later in November. Philip